This month's Perf Talk is brought to you by the Guitar Friends. And then the other thing too was that it's very interesting because up until that point, the only tunings for classical guitar, as far as standard repertoire goes, is drop D and maybe the lute tuning with the third string turned to F sharp. But with Sunburst, it's double drop D, and it's very much a steel string thing. So I just found that always interesting.
Well, I've really brought alternate tunings heavily into the classical guitar world, and more than anybody else. And it's just because I like experimenting with them, and I've taken the time to understand these tunings to a degree, so I can even improvise in them a bit. Not as well like some of the more complex ones as in standard tuning, but where I can actually play, improvise in them, trying to learn some of the knowledge. So I'm not fishing, like when you're writing in these tunings, you have to learn to understand them or you can't write properly. So, other people who use like, Koi and Baba, but that's a very improvised sounding piece. It's sort of very repetitive. It's very charismatic, but, it doesn't really develop much because it's very difficult to develop. I mean, people might disagree, but I think so. It's just, it's drony and beautiful. Some people hear it and they go nuts. It's a magic sound. But I've used tunings. I've written pieces that don't sound like raga-like or drony. They're like people are sometimes shocked when they realize them in like three strings are tuned differently because it just sounds like normal music, very contrapuntal and developing and transposing. That ain't easy to do. And so now the inherent challenges, of course, is that nylon string having much less tension does not support alter tunings the way steel does. Steel, you can tune down a whole step. The string still got a lot of punch and power. You tune down a nylon string, as you know, a whole step, and it gets pretty flabby. So we have to contend with that, and it does limit us somewhat. You can't get too radical. But that being said, a huge part of my catalog is in lute tuning. And then I would augment that by sometimes dropping 6 to D as well, and then lute tuning. And then I dropped like Sunburst 6 and 1 to D, so double drop D, and 3 to F sharp. So that's like a hybrid lute tuning. And I've written so many pieces in that tuning. So D, A, D, F sharp, B, D. And I've written, Equations of Beauty is in that tuning, my piece Yamor, my piece Centerpiece, the one I just released, Song for Susan, and on and on. And this tuning took me over a year to figure out how to compose it. I knew I liked it, and I had like one thing. I found this riff. I thought, this is cool. I'm going to compose a piece around it. And every time I'd sit down, it would end in frustration. Like, everything I do just doesn't work. It turns drony, and I'm not, I'm okay, drony once in a while is great. It's like give you this hypnotic thing, but I got to go farther. So one day it clicked, after a year struggle and, periodic struggle with it. Then I understood it, and I wrote the piece Centerpiece. Bam, it was beautiful. And then I wrote Yamor, and Yamor is very sophisticated in that tuning. And then, 6 movements of Equations of Beauty, all capoed on the 5th fret in that tuning. It's mind-blowing. Just the what I had to do and it just started flowing like water. And that's one of the tunings I use. I call it Yamor tuning, but it's like my tuning. I've written so much in it. But yeah, it's hard to know if I'm in standard tuning, drop D, Sunburst tuning, lute tuning, or Yamor tuning. I use all these tunings. Sometimes 6 to F I use to give you that Lydian sound.
Yeah.
I just wrote a piece with 6 to F. Duchamp would do that once in a while.
Duchamp, I think Mysterious Barricades. Yeah.
Mysterious Habitats. Yeah.
Habitats. There you go.
Yeah. He would use that once in a while, and to great effect. He's probably the best improviser in the guitar world ever had.
Yeah, I think there's a trend. Not a trend, but a couple of other players have surfaced. Like, you know how open tuning in blues is usually like in E, and you just go 1 4 5, and there's a player called named Sanny Landreth who does things, who frets behind the slide, so that he gets the other chords, and then there's this new kid out in Winnipeg. With the same last name, Joey Landreth, but they're not related, and he plays in open C, but he plays jazz.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he
That's
it's
his
not
tuning. Yeah.
yes, but that's just his tuning. He likes the super low, the low
Yeah.
register and then the high
Yeah.
register. So that's really interesting. When you stumbled on that tuning, were you looking for a specific, I don't know, ambiance, or was it a way to reach the notes easier?
Well, at some point, as you know, when you compose, you you have to decide what key you're going to be in ultimately, and then sometimes, for me, then tuning choices come into play. How am I going to tune the guitar for this piece? I don't usually radically change, but I use one of my tunings, but usually becomes quickly focused in that tuning. If I'm in lute tuning, I might try standard tuning for the ideas and lute tuning, and realize, well, I'm going to commit to lute tuning, and then everything has to be. You're not going to change it during the piece. I'm not. So, yeah. So I think I don't remember the inception of that tuning, more tuning, but it's clear that I was doing Linus and Lucy, which was 6 to D and 3 to F sharp. And sometimes my guitar would be in sunburst tuning, 6 to D and 1 to D. And probably, they would overlap. And then I just would check it out and go, wow, 3 Ds. That's actually a problem in a way. It's like made for droning. 3 Ds. And, it's kind of perfect for B minor. It is B minor with an A string. So it sounds really good in D and A minor. But I don't write everything in those keys. And that's what makes it challenging. Like, so Yamor is in B minor, but then it modulates in the middle section all over the place. And centerpiece also in B minor, but then in Equations of Beauty, I branched out there in G major. I think, Song for Azusa is F sharp minor. All these different, just messing around with different key centers, which require some understanding of the tuning. But yeah, once I found it, I fell in love with it, and I just, had to learn it enough where I could compose functionally in it, because like all my music is contrapuntal, so whether it sounds like it or not, it always is. And so when I'm doing a tuning I don't know, that's an added challenge, like, because I got to handle it. How am I gonna? I got to think this stuff through. I don't like hanging voices, like where they just don't make sense. They don't follow, a path. It's what happens with a lot. A lot of people write music and they've never really worked, thought, and deeply obsessed about ways to do it. It's like any real composer would do that. And there's nothing wrong. Of course, I encourage people to write, have fun. As amateurs, it's all great. But if you're going to go that path, then at some point you want to master the various skills and use them. And you don't hear that a lot in the people pumping out music. Now there are some incredibly talented players, that are composing, but not a lot. It's not easy. As we know, the world is awash with technical, super high level virtuosi, right? It's just they're a dime a dozen now with the pedagogies now in the steel string world and the classical guitar world. You throw a rock at any festival, you're going to hit somebody that can play their butt off, right? Just it's incredible. But there's not been a proliferation of really good composers because it's much, 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 much harder. That's a funny thing to say, isn't it? But it's like, because it's not easy to play guitar really well. Very hard. But that's 10 times easier than writing really good music year after year after year. So, because if it wasn't so, there'd be a lot more like Roland Deans in the world. That kind of thing. But there's not. There's very few people of that, creative category. But they're just players every year, a new crop. Just playing the heck out of everything. It's amazing. Interesting, philosophically. None of this is a criticism. It's just the way the world works. There's something about composing. It's very much a creative, act. And like any creative act, to create something, your knowledge and study and intent and commitment has to be deep. And few people want to go that far. But that's fine,
Hi there. Perf the Castro here, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of Perf Talk. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, like, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Ring that bell. This is just a quick break from the discussion so that I can take care of a few announcements. First up, Perf Talk is now a podcast, and it's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to download the full episodes, you can go to my website, perfectodecastro.com, and click on the Perf Talk tab.
And while you're at my website, I invite you to join and subscribe to my members only area. It's kind of like Patreon, but it's Perfection. For only $15 a month, you can download all the digital goods on my web store. From the video lessons, to the song and album MP3s, to the PDF tabs and guitar profiles. You'll also get into the members only area where I host exclusive Perfection only perks, like advanced viewing of all my upcoming videos, more downloadable PDFs and lessons, my entire backing track library, and music releases that are not available to the public. Of course, your name will be included in the list of Perfections featured in all of my videos. And as Perfection grows, all the membership perks that I offer will grow as well. As of this video, here is the list of current Perfections. Thank you so much for your support. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you who already bought their own Practice Mix Perfecto shirts and merch like this mug and this hoodie. Sales from these shirts and merch helps me keep making these videos for everybody to enjoy. And when you get your stuff, don't forget to send me a photo either through my Facebook page or Instagram account. That way I can feature you in future videos as I have done with my friends right here. Okay, now let's get back to Perf Talk.
Well, I think also going back to the thing you mentioned about the lines being incomplete, it's both a limitation of the guitar and also it's one of its redeeming aspects when it comes to transcribing. Because even if you transcribe a piece from, let's say, piano to guitar, you can lose some of the voices and it'll still sound very pretty on the guitar.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's all musically speaking. There's a lot of things. The music is just pared down to its bare minimum. To sometimes it's no longer, a little under beyond. It's a little under below what it should be.
Yeah, I mean, any instrument you got to accept its limitations. It is what it is. I mean, most of us have 6 strings. You have a few more, but
but I only have 4 fingers.
4 fingers. That's there's only so much you can do with that. It's amazing how much we can do with that. It's incredible.
Okay, so I got to bring it back. So how long, when you started learning guitar, did you start composing your music?
Instantly. Yeah, that was clear to me. I've always wanted to create things, even as a small child, and did. And so as soon as I knew anything on the guitar, I was writing music. I've lost a lot of that early music as soon as because for a while when I didn't know notation well yet, I had my own little code. I would kind of write things down. If I could find it, it would probably be indecipherable now. But it was a mnemonic for me to remember what I was doing. And then when I could write it, very quickly I learned standard notation. So I began to write it down. Remember I had one, I was, in elementary school and I was, writing this piece in pencil and, and I was eating a hot dog and mustard spilled on it. I remember I had this score with a mustard stain I was working on. I remember that. It's too bad I can't find that stuff. So yeah, as soon as I could write. I think a little bit survived from when I was pretty young. The really early stuff is gone, but yeah, I remember some of it too,
How has that evolved for you?
Well, that's, I guess that answers the question. That's what it has done. It's evolved. It's just it's so wrapped up in my my view of the world and my journey as a human being and the things I find beautiful and fascinating. And that's just an expression of all that.
So I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. So when you sit down to compose a piece, what is the first thing that you do?
Well, what I often do is improvise. I improvise pretty much every day, sometimes several pieces. And as I've gotten older, I get better at it. I improvise complete pieces now, and I can remember everything and come back to the A theme and the B theme and develop it. I'll often play something, and Annie, when she hears something she doesn't recognize, she comes in with her iPhone. Hey, sweetie, would you give me a little milk too, if there's any coffee left? Thank you. She'll hear that I'm playing something unfamiliar, and which is most of the time, so she'll bring her phone in and put it on memo mode and record it. And so many of the pieces I have recently are intact improvisations with Some have almost no changes whatsoever to them. Some have a little bit, adjust things or maybe add another section. But like Home was a complete improvisation. Everything I improvised is in that piece. I think things were in a slightly different order. I was just playing it again and again, but I did the upper stuff. But that was absolutely improvised. I changed almost nothing. Tightened it up a little bit. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, astounding, right? I mean, for me, I can't believe it. Thank you. It's like when I hear that stuff back, I'm like, who did that? Did I do that? I mean, it's just, you just take, like I'm sure sometimes you might kind of be aware of yourself playing. You go, how am I even doing that? It's like it's kind of a magical, mystical thing, right? All that time and effort, it just kind of plays itself now. I mean, sure, we struggle. This is hard. I got to practice, but still, it's amazing. So Home was one. Annie's Song, which was just released, is intact improvisation. And a hilarious digression to me, it was very strange. I improvised a thing, very difficult. And I made some mistakes because it was like really all these really fast little things. I just played it, And then Annie said, I want that. I want that to be my song. I said, okay, I'll practice it. I'll learn it because it was, I improvised it. And I wrote it out and I started to practice it. And I found it very difficult. Because I couldn't just play it. When I was looking at the music, I couldn't just play it with that fluidity when I improvised it. I was like, what's going on? I played it. And now I can't, now I got to practice it. I'm messing it up. So funny, I was still getting my head around that. Like when in the freedom of the moment, I can just do this stuff. But then when I look at the music, I'm like, well, let me finger that. I'm like, oh God, that's harder. So that's one. There was another one that's like Dancing with Maya. That was partially improvised, but some of them are intact improvisation. So your question, how does it start? Often with an improvisation. Now, an improvisation often will just give me an idea. Like there'll be an element. I think that would be a good base for a tune. So then I'll take that. Maybe I take just one little element of that I like, and often I get smaller and smaller until I reach just a few notes, like something, and then I develop entire sections on a very small fragment of the theme. I find that to be a much richer way to record. In my youth, I was guilty of what a lot of immature composers do. You come up to your piece with a wheelbarrow and you you just throw, here you go, somewhere, I need some more material. And it's just you get this stuff, endless, because it's difficult to develop ideas. That's very hard in a good way. It's difficult to make them make sense and really develop. That takes a lot of thought. So, when I hear a lot of my early pieces, I still find them very good because I never let anything out unless I thought it was good. I wrote some pieces that are complete, but I thought, they're all right. But I'm never going to publish that. It's just not good enough. It's like, not many, but I have some like that. I just sat on, man. Yeah. So that does happen. But a lot of the early ones I do hear maybe an excess of material. I could have pared it down. Now I often use a small amount of material and develop it greatly. I really enjoy doing that. There are occasions where I'm still throwing stuff. We're just having a good time and it needs to go all these places. And that's a different approach. But yeah, it's so often I take those fragments and use that as a germ, like a little springboard, and I just sketch, and that's what I do when I'm composing. I'm sketching. I take these ideas and I play them more ways than I can imagine, in ways that I know I will never use in the piece. But that's the point, is because it takes me out of the box and keeps me from repeating myself too much or being formulaic, which I don't want to be. So if I'm always narrowing down on what I want, it tends to get smaller. It's a less creative process. If I expand out and just do all this crazy stuff, like a reggae version of it, which actually does sneak into my music a lot, but just do these crazy things, and record them and listen to them, and that takes me out. Then I find things that are much more interesting that I wouldn't have found had I not gone through that kind of wildish sketching process, just going at it. And then it does focus down, I'm going to do this. Mechanism is a great example of those that have heard that. In the middle is that's an illustration. That's like a storyboard of what my sketching process. All the stuff that comes together in a small amount of material can just develop in so many different ways, just augmentation and inversion and just all these different elements. And if you look closely, you see connections to things that are surprising, that are not that obvious. But that illustrates kind of and better than a lot of my pieces. You can really see, like, wow, that's a lot of sketching. But that's how I got there. There's things I didn't put in the piece that were even wilder, So that's kind of my process.
Yeah, that's awesome, because the common impression of people for composers is that they just, that these things just magically appear out of the air, and suddenly it's like, oh, here's a new piece. A lot of people don't realize the amount of work that composers put into stuff so that you get the final product that is beautiful. It's not. Yeah, we don't just well, sometimes we do, but we don't. But most often, great pieces are not just conjured out of thin air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the rare moment. I mean, like, the improvisations are great. Those were like gifts. I just do them, but they're based on a lifetime of skill and increasing my knowledge. But in general, you're right. There's this, you take a lot of time and thought, a very intensive process of, adjusting things, like, what does it need, deciding too much here, not enough there, is the energy flow right? Yeah, it's a real effort,
Do you find that when you, let's say, play an earlier piece now, that you play it, and then you find a section, do you find sections that you think, oh, maybe I think I could make this better, or in your place, right where you're at right now, you prefer to rewrite it?
Very little, because I was always kind of what's the word? Not critical, but I was editing myself as I went. And like I mentioned before, if I didn't feel pretty strongly that this is good, it's a complete form and it's good, I wouldn't publish it or record it. Now, that being said, there are a couple pieces where I was always a tiny bit uneasy with, like, this C section here or whatever, There's a couple pieces like that. And I have revised, and I've done very little revision in my life, but I have revised a couple of those just for fun. One I did include in a newer edition of my, which was the Dreamscapes? I think so, Pine Cove. Always bothered me, the C section. So a little bit, it was fine, but something, so I always thought about it. So I kind of changed it, and I don't know if I improved it or not. But I did change that. But that's the exception for me, because usually I kind of don't let stuff out that if I feel it's kind of half-assed or not, or half-baked. Some people are less self-critical. They'll just kind of pump stuff out there, and then they're always. I mean, it's like the George Lucas syndrome. He did such a great job with Star Wars, right? And then later the movies became much less good in many people's opinion. And then there was this thing where he would edit them incessantly, again and again and again, make versions. And that's one style of artist. I mean, a sculptor can't do that. They're not going to be chipping away. You can't put stuff back. With a film, though, you can change the edits. With music, you can go back and revise it. And I've known some musicians like that too. Every time they go back to one of their pieces, I'm going to revise it. I'm not like that. I see them as like little entities. And if they approach this kind of feeling of not perfection, but like entityness, like this existence it is what it is, and it's like almost alive, this little being. And I'm not going to necessarily interfere with that. But related, what I did was, I wrote a piece called Newman, that's in lute tuning and very much Renaissance based. And I recorded that on denouement, I think, in 1994 or something. So it was an earlier piece I wrote when I was maybe 30 or something, I don't know. Earlier, maybe late 20s, I'm not sure. And a friend has been asking me for years to write a follow-up to Newman, and a friend in Germany. And it took me a while to get around to it, but just, I think, last year or about a year ago or so, maybe two, I sat down to actually write the follow-up to Newman. So here's a piece I'm basing it on when I was maybe 30, and now when I was 60, 30 years later, writing this follow-up. Well, Now writing is a different process, even though there's a similarity in the sound to me, but I've evolved, I've changed. So instead of one movement, I wrote three. So now I have the Newman suite, which is getting really popular. So it's the original track Newman and three movements that follow. I've never done this before. It's interesting. A track I wrote as a young man, and then I developed those ideas as an older man, and it blooms into this suite. I don't know if you've seen it, but I just released the video Lumen, which is the second movement. And, I'm getting, a lot of people buying the Newman suite now. I recorded it for GSI as well, but I did the wrong form. I left out one section a little bit because I was, doing it on this little beautiful Torres, I think. And I had just kind of completed it, and I got spaced on the forms. So I was like, oh no. So anyway, my version is correct. It's like and it's beautiful. So it really came out nicely. So, but that illustrates different takes on the ideas that are in Newman. But yeah, that's not a revision, but it's an expansion of one of my earlier works. And I have trouble not writing multi-movement pieces now. It's like when I sit down to write a piece, often Equations of Beauty was going to be one piece. And then I just kept writing and writing and writing, and ended up 6 movements, like 23 minutes long, 27. I don't know, it's really long, sweet. That would be the second half of my concerts when I was touring, before touring evaporated, It was Equations of Beauty. It was like epic, intense, man. It was such an experience to do that. Compositionally and performance is so hard, it's great.
Yeah, back when I used to give concerts too, I enjoyed the multi-movement pieces the most.
Yeah,
because you get to really revel in the music and just present it in without being pressed for time. It's like,
yeah,
and I get to savor the music as well, because sometimes with a 3-minute piece or a 2-minute piece, you play, you're done, and it's like, I want to keep playing.
Yeah, well, I agree completely. Some really complex ideas and things of great value can't be tweeted. You can't play a 3-movement piece and necessarily achieve. And there's nothing wrong with short pieces. I write 1 billion of them, but larger forms can create larger structures. You read Odysseus, an epic work, and it's truly an epic work. You're not going to get that from a chapter, but this whole thing going all the islands and meeting all these beings and gods, and a multi-movement work is like this. It's this epic journey that you can create. And as I get older, I'm much more interested in larger forms and being able to hold them in my mind. And that's what's very hard. Music is time-based, and the visual world is space-based. We relate everything, and music requires time to unfold. But to understand it, as a performer, as a composer, whatever, or even as a listener, you have to let it unfold in time and be able to hold the form in your mind for it to have meaning. So with a multi-movement work or just a very long work, that gives the potential of creating very impressive and meaningful structures. Also gives you the possibility of making an entire mess of things. Like a composer with less skill, might have a long work that you just wish would end sooner. That's the danger. You need to have the skills to be able to fill that larger form and create something beautiful. So I think about this more and more as I get older. That's such an integral and important part. It's an inevitable part of music, understanding formal structures in a larger way.
Nice. And I guess you already answered this earlier when I guess in your early compositional style you'd cram everything in and pare it down. And now you're more into growing stuff.
Yeah, I would say that's a good way to look at it. In general, yeah. That's the process I try to follow. I mean, I try not to follow any rules, but that is what kind of happens. I'm open to anything. I try not, and that's the danger, right? When you make any art for years and years, not to become a parody of yourself. This I hear in lots of artists, and seeing painters, and it happens to filmmakers, authors. It can definitely happen to authors. It's very hard not to, especially if you achieve success with some approaches. It's really hard to resist not wanting to recreate that process. But by doing so, of course, you begin to limit your creativity if you really take that formulaic approach. Now, some artists, I don't consider them artists because they take a complete marketing trend-based approach, as you alluded to earlier. This is what's selling, this is what I'm going to do, and there's no more depth to it than that. And I've maybe got the skills to do that, and it's all, nice little cupcakes I put out there. Oh, the wind's changed. I'm going to do this now. That's okay. I don't blame those people at all. You got to make a living, and maybe they really don't have internally that much to say. They feel compelled to share these things. But I'm very much the other way. I don't give a damn about trends. Never have, and I never will. And I just write what I want, and I don't really care what anybody thinks. And that sounds amazing maybe, or fierce, but it's true. I could care less what anybody thinks. Now, I get emails daily of people that are very moved by my music, and I appreciate that. And of course, I'm glad about that because I would like it to be a source of solace or inspiration or growth for them. That actually does mean a lot to me. But opinions that people have, could care less. I only write what I like. That's it. And if some people like it, that's wonderful. If they don't like it, don't give a damn.
That reminds me of something I read. Somebody asked you to write another sunburst and call it like sunset or something. I just found it funny.
Well, I did write that piece. It's called Moontan, and that's the joke. Same tuning, sunburst, Moontan.
Oh, okay.
And I had fun, and it was a commission from actually a dear friend in Japan, and he's a guy I still tour with. Last year I toured Japan with him. I was supposed to be there this year in September with him, and I've composed a number of pieces for him, like Albacine. I just wrote one last week for him that he's going to record, and we're going to record together. But yeah, it was funny. The commission. I mean, it was a very kind of language thing from Japanese to English. Oh, York-san, please write sunset, like follow up to sunburst. I'm like, no, it ain't going to be called sunset. Nah, it's not going to work. So, and I said Moontan. But the challenge was cool. I had to write something that was related in a way, and I used these kind of techniques, the two-handed slapping and stuff. Yeah. But it was a collaborative commission from Sony Japan and Dai Kimura and some other entity. They actually flew from Japan to pick up the score. Back in the days when before the internet had collapsed the music industry, and they'd actually spend money to do this. And Dai Kimura, the guy I work with a lot, he's famous in Japan like a pop star. I mean, he's just doing tours with him is really awesome. Yeah, but he's not known out of Japan. So much, but he's a great person and a really talented guy. I've known him since he was 13. The quartet was over there touring, and I heard him play. And we had met this man. He said, "You got to hear my son." He was involved somehow with the presenter, so we came to his house and he fed us dinner. And Di was there. He's still hadn't hit puberty yet. Hardly. He's a little short kid, and he put the metronome on full, whatever it is, two something, and did 16-note scales from the 12th fret, chromatic. And I'm like, that kid can play. He's like a prodigy. And now he writes very well. And yeah, he's just a fun guy. As he grew up, then he became really famous. And, we've collaborated together many times. It's really been a fruitful.
It's also
it's like looking for the well of immortality.
Yeah, and
there's no such thing. You just find a guitar you like, and you're responsible for making the sounds on it.
Yeah, it's not unheard of to blame the instrument too if you're not able to do something.
Yeah, that's a cop out.
Yeah.